Hello and welcome to the next episode of the Nourish and Strengthen podcast. I am so excited about the conversation I'm going to be having today with my guest, and I think it's going to be so helpful for all of my listeners. I have Nikki Sapiro Vinckier on here today, and she is a PA who really likes to focus and specialize on patient advocacy and making sure that you feel prepared to go into your doctor appointments feeling heard and just having that good experience. She wrote the book called We Deserve More, and she's the founder of Take Back Trust, which we're going to talk more about those things towards the end. But welcome, Nikki, to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you because this discussion is something that so many women need to hear. We're going to talk about those doctor visits, why they feel rushed, why you feel dismissed, maybe a little bit gaslit sometimes. We're going to go into all of that, and we're going to hear from it from another perspective, right? I typically just hear from the women who are frustrated, but I'm so excited to hear from the other side a little bit. But Nikki, why don't you tell us kind of how you got into this, a little bit of your background?
Yeah. So I've worked clinically for the last decade or so, and
Okay.
I worked in reproductive health care, doing gynecological visits and gynecological care. And it was really as I went through the system myself, as I became a mom, that I was noticing how many gaps in care there actually
How many
were.
kids do you have?
I have 3 kids. So I have an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 4-year-old.
And are you still working clinically, or do you focus on your book and your other stuff now?
I do advocacy full time now.
Okay, gotcha.
A really lovely transition. I'm sure at some point I will go back clinically, but right now there's a lot to do here, which is great. But
yeah.
It was as I noticed that I felt like I wasn't getting the best care, and it was within a system that I knew so intimately. And I felt like if I'm slipping through the cracks, then who else is, right?
Yeah.
I have all the resources and I have all the education and I have everything that's made to set up to help me succeed, and I'm not getting what I need out of the system, then the system isn't really set up to serve anyone. And so that was when I kind of started taking a step back to be like, what are the ways that I can help? And it was my own experiences. And then it was also watching a lot of friends go through the same system too, where they would side text me for like, we call them curbside consults, but essentially like, this is what I found out, or this is what my provider's telling me. Like, what do you think about it? And I know it was really helpful for them to have somebody else that they could kind of like bounce thoughts back and forth. But the majority of women and people don't have access to somebody like that. And so part of why I really started going into learning how to be your own better patient advocate is so that I could empower everybody to kind of enter the room to get the most out of that visit possible.
I love that. That's amazing. And so you noticed that in your OBGYN visits with having your babies and stuff like that?
Yep.
Yeah. Sure. That's amazing. Yeah. So how did it become this way? Like, how did it become this place where we have rushed visits and you don't have that advocacy?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it stems out of the way that American healthcare is structured. And a lot of that is dictated by insurance and insurance reimbursement.
Sure.
And it's a pretty unfortunate setup the way it is. And everybody's hands are pretty tied, right? We see a lot of clinicians are really disheartened by the medical system the way it is. And that's why we're seeing such a massive exodus of some of these really great clinicians into things like concierge care or private medicine, where they essentially are saying, I'm not getting enough time with my patients on a typical strategy, on a typical schedule that's reimbursed by insurance. And if I want to spend more time with my patients, I'm not going to make enough money to be able to do that in a standardized model. Yeah. So the reason why we see so many people moving into concierge medicine is that it's really evident that even clinicians are noticing that it impacts patient care as well. It's not just the patients who are like, man, I feel so rushed. It's the clinicians who are also like working extensively hard to try to fit the things in those short visits, spending their lunch hours responding to messages, calling patients after hours, like all these things. It's a really unsustainable structure the way that it's built.
Yeah. So what are the insurance rules? Like, do they come out and say you can only spend 15 minutes? Like what are the rules that the clinicians are trying to abide by?
Good question. So It's not really like you can only spend 15 minutes, but it's kind of like you are reimbursed for what you do. So,
Okay.
for example, with reimbursement, we see within gynecological healthcare that procedures are reimbursed at higher rates than conversations, essentially. So, when you
Mm-hmm.
do things, you get paid more than if you're just sitting there and having a consultation talking about options. And so, when we look at how do we set up a healthcare clinic that can function to pay its employees and pay
Mm-hmm.
the whole staff and
Oh
pay the
yeah.
rent as everything gets more expensive, what ends up happening is the visits get shorter in order
Mm-hmm.
to make enough to cover all of the costs, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how it works. Another piece of the puzzle, too, that a lot of people don't typically understand is the difference between preventative visits and problem visits. And
Oh
so
yeah.
this is one thing that I talk about a lot because I have so many people that will go into a preventative visit or their annual exam and they
Mm-hmm.
haven't seen their clinician for a year. And so they think about their laundry list of things that have been bothering them and they
Sure.
want to address all of them at their annual exam. And in
Mm-hmm.
theory, it makes sense because you haven't seen your clinician and you're like, okay, now is my time to hammer through all of my
Right.
questions.
All the things that like weren't as big enough deal to make their own appointment, but here's their list for the last year. Yeah.
Exactly. But the problem is that preventative visit is really made just to do kind of your like basic checkpoint things
Sure.
and really like check a couple of medications that you're already on, but it's not made for addressing new problems or new concerns. And so I
Gotcha.
think that's one of the important things is really learning what visit you're going in for. And if you're going
Mm-hmm.
in for an annual exam, realizing, okay, maybe you can bring up one, max two new things or concerns. But if you have a multitude of questions or concerns or issues that have come up, the best thing that you can do is actually make a problem visit so that you
Mm-hmm.
have time to be able to go into those questions that you have. And otherwise, you're going to end up kind of setting yourself up for failure automatically. If you don't have
Mm-hmm.
the right appointment set up automatically, you aren't going to have the right time to be able to go in depth on this. And so I think
Yeah.
that that's a really important piece that's worth understanding within the medical system. And a lot of people say, well, the biggest issue too is that if I want to schedule a problem visit, it's 7 months down the road, or I've got to go come
Oh,
back and do X, Y, and Z. And I
yeah.
think that, again, that's also just kind of a part of the failures of our medical system is we don't have enough appointments that are available. But that is really the best way for you to have an opportunity to be listened to is by really having the right appointment type first and foremost.
That makes sense. Why is it that it just takes so long to get in for that kind of a visit?
Well, I think right now the healthcare system has been broken for a long time, but after
Mm-hmm.
COVID, it feels like we just have a massive lack of clinicians. And it's only
Mm.
really getting worse with some of these budget cuts that we're seeing are happening. But primary care, we have a huge deficiency of clinicians nationwide, and a lot of some of the relational parts of care as well. So this is where, and we talked a little bit about this, Lindsay, but really leaning into both like physician extenders, whether that be a
Mm-hmm.
nurse practitioner or a PA. This is where
Yeah.
that can be a really helpful
I
piece.
love seeing nurse practitioners and PAs. They're like, the doctor is out 6 months, but she can see you next week. I'm like, deal. And I've
Yeah.
often found why is it, and maybe this is just the ones I've seen, I feel like PAs and nurse practitioners, it seems like they care a little more. That's probably a total generalized statement. What do you think about that?
I mean, I'm partial because I am a
I know.
PA. But I
But
think
why does it feel that way?
So I think there's a couple things, right? In the clinic that I worked in, the bulk of my patients were scheduled on a 20-minute block, whereas the
Okay.
physicians were scheduled on a 10-minute block. So even
Oh.
before anything else happened, I have more time with my patients.
Is it because more people are trying to get in with the actual doctor?
Um, no,
Or
I think it's because like types of visits, I would tend
okay.
to do more of the like education based visits, right?
Okay.
The visits during pregnancy where we're doing your glucola screening, where we're talking
Mhm.
about diet, where we're doing like more of that conversational makes a lot more sense to have a PA or an NP lead that conversation and lead into
Mhm.
it. I think similarly, nurse practitioners most of them were nurses first. And so you
Mhm.
had bedside nurses that became NPs, and you end up having this like very holistic view of treating the whole person first.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think PAs by nature, you end up having these people who chose being a PA instead of being an MD. It wasn't that they became a PA because it was a backup to being an MD, right?
Sure.
We know that PA school can be as difficult to get into as med school and very highly competitive to get into.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that they like defaulted to being a PA. They chose to be
Yeah.
a PA. And part of why I chose it was that it did have more time for that like education and relational conversation piece with my patients. And I think that that's such an important part of medicine.
Yeah.
And I think part of why I do what I do now is I've been used to really like sitting down and listening to patients for years and years and years. And I do think it's such an important piece. So no, I don't think you've made it up that physician extenders have more time or listen more intently. I think across the board, that's probably correct. And there are always going to be exceptions to the rule that have, you know, incredibly amazing clinicians and physicians and incredibly shitty NPs and PAs. Like it's going to be all
definitely. Right? I totally agree. There's the good and the bad in every profession for sure.
Yeah. And I think the cool thing that I remind people is that we work as a team. And so a lot of people are like, oh, well, I really want to be seen by the doctor only. And the way that it worked in my practice was like, if it was ever above the scope, the first thing I would do is go to a physician that I worked alongside and say, hey, this is what's presenting, right? We work very closely together. So exactly what you're saying, like the PA or NP could see you within a week. Like if it's something that's out of our scope that we don't feel comfortable with, you still get the expertise of a physician. Like it's not like you're going to be kind of like left floundering. Like PAs and NPs are incredible clinicians. And we also know our scope to know enough that if this is beyond what we feel comfortable with, let's be a team, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that that's an important piece, is that I definitely think it's a great option for people and allows us to get quicker and sometimes more comprehensive care.
Yeah, I love that. So with all of this, you know, patients feeling rushed and dismissed and things like that, people are going to the internet. Tell me pros and cons to that, right? Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah. So I think we're all really quick to think about it as like a terrible thing. And the reason why I think that it's bad is that there is a lot of misinformation that we see online. And I think in addition to that misinformation, what we know is that really anyone can say anything online.
Yeah.
And oftentimes when it's like emotional or flagrant, it gets the most views. Even if it's
or very black and white or
Yes. Yeah, people want to feel seen in their experience. And so it allows a lot of misinformation to float to the top in terms of views. Is a lot of clinicians are really freaking boring to listen to. So they'll come and like combat some of this stuff, but then it's just like flatline and it goes nowhere, right?
Yeah.
Like nobody
you got to have a certain pizzazz on the internet to
go viral. Yeah, for better or worse. And it turns out that it tends to be non-clinicians that have this pizzazz, and then we see a lot of misinformation. So I think that's the danger, right? Is that so many people can just like say anything that they want, and then it floats to the top, right? But I do think that some of the good things, for example, there's something called Nancy's Nook, which is a web-based, I think it's a Facebook group that is for endometriosis patients. And they can go on and they can look for like good surgeons in their area. And they can kind of talk about like, here's the care that I got and what's happening for you. And it becomes this kind of like community-based.
Totally. Well, especially when you don't have that in real life. People suffering with endometriosis don't always have all their best friends also going through the same thing.
That's right. And we see it all the time with like infertility. There are very active groups online for infertility. And I think that's a shitty club to be a part of, but to find community within it, it's a lot less isolating. And so we've got this kind of like peak of misinformation, but then we also have this ability to find community. And, you know, the risk of misinformation within community is there. But I think there's also so much power that comes from finding other people that have been in your shoes. You know, we see it. I mean, it's all across the board. There's breast cancer groups. There's like all these amazing things. And so I do think that that is one one really awesome, powerful part of people turning to the internet is that I don't think it has to be in lieu of your care. It should not be in lieu of your care. It should be, how do we take this information to augment my care? How do I take this information to change the way that I show up to ask questions? And one thing I really try to advocate for patients is that you actually need to do homework first before you go into your visit. Like, you need to take some time and think about, what questions do you have? What do you want to see addressed? Like, what are the actual issues that are impacting your day-to-day? And write them down, whether it's on a piece of paper or on the notes app in your phone, and go in ready with like actual tangible things so that you can talk to your clinician. Because it's very common for people to go into the office and then they're like, what do you want to talk about? It just like,
I don't know.
Out of my brain. Exactly. Yeah. I don't know. Yes. How often does it happen? I don't know.
Yeah.
And so I think that's an important piece, is like, find your communities online. And use that as fodder to talk about your care, to learn more about your care, and then still go to the clinician with those questions.
I love that. So let's dive into that a little bit. So most of my audience is in their 40s and 50s, and they are feeling dismissed from their doctors on perimenopause care. And I've talked to a lot of OBGYNs on this podcast that say, you know, truthfully, we don't get a lot of education on that in medical school. And for any doctor who does specialize in that, it's because they went out and they got that continuing education on their own. So, and it's really hard to find a doctor like that. Like, I'm speaking from experience. People here in Utah are like, where do you go? And I'm like, I know where I go, but if it's not close to where they live, I don't know what to tell you, you know? And so how would you recommend preparing for a visit? If you were in your 40s and 50s, you look much younger than that, but let's just pretend you're in your 40s and 50s, but you have the background as a PA. How would you advise someone to prepare for a visit if they're just like, I don't feel good, I don't really know why, I don't feel like myself, I don't really know what to ask, I just want them to fix me?
Yeah, great question. So the first thing I would do is really start listening to your body about what it is that doesn't feel great. When is it that you don't feel great? Is it after certain meals? Is it in the morning? Is it at night? What is it that you don't feel great? Do you feel fatigued? Do you feel lethargic? Do you feel whatever it is, right? Like, we need to start honing down our language so that when we talk to a clinician about it, we have better descriptions first.
Yeah.
So really figuring out, okay, what is it that I'm feeling? And then how often am I feeling it? When am I feeling it? And on a scale of 1 to 10, how much does it disrupt my day-to-day?
Oh, that's a good one.
Disrupt my quality of life? And what have I done to try to improve it? And has that worked? Right?
Okay.
So really trying all of these pieces and putting them together almost in like its own informational sheet. Like, get an old school calendar and write down, if you feel tired, just put it on the calendar. Is it cyclical? Do we notice that these symptoms that you're feeling happen around ovulation or happen around your period, or are they happening every single day, right?
I love this. Yeah.
I think so much of this is gathering data and then bringing that data with us. And you're right, clinicians on average get very, very, very little menopausal education. And it's really only been in response to so many women saying, we are not getting the perimenopause and menopausal care that we need and deserve, that clinicians are finally listening and going back to the drawing board and saying, oh, we need to do better. I think also what we're seeing is there's a generation of female doctors that are aging into perimenopause and menopause and answering their own symptoms too. So I think the same way in which for me, I noticed the gaps in care through my own birthing experience, what we're seeing is an entire like swath of female physicians and female clinicians that are going through perimenopause and menopause and being like, oh yeah, this actually really does suck. How do we make this better for people?
Yes,
right?
That's exactly the scenario. And because we have a couple clients right now who work with my team who are in perimenopause and they're doctors, and they've come on my podcast, and that's exactly their story. Like, I didn't realize there was such a gap until I got there. And I realized that all the things I've been like, one of my doctors was even like, I feel like I need to apologize to all the patients that I told that I kind of blew off because I didn't know the answers really. And now I'm here and I got to figure it out for me and for them.
Yeah. And, I think there are a few things. we have made it easier than ever to do telehealth. So it's
Mm-hmm.
easier to get telehealth care, which is very helpful for perimenopause. Kind of what you were saying, Lindsay. If people don't know who to go to locally, or they live in a rural area,
Yes.
or they live in an
Telehealth is
area,
so good for
telehealth
that.
is really awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be a little weary of some of the recommendations because perimenopause and menopause is a booming $1 billion industry,
Yeah.
right? So I think a lot of people are trying to solve issues, and some of that solving can be profitable. So
Mm-hmm.
I would be weary on what the recommendations are. I'm not saying
Mm-hmm.
don't choose them,
Yeah.
but in the back of your mind, I would just have that thought process. And then, you go from that with an open mind
Yeah.
and figure out what's the best option for you.
Yeah. I love that. Let's talk a little bit kind of on the same lines about gaslighting and okay, don't take this the wrong way. Speaking as a clinician, a PA, if a doctor doesn't know the answer, do you find that sometimes they kind of blow off the patient? I'm just saying that's how people feel.
Yeah.
And do you think that the root of that is that they weren't educated on that, and maybe women wish they would just be like, I don't really know. That's a great question, but maybe they just kind of gaslight you into thinking you're crazy when I don't know. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I think that there's both that happen. I think
Yes,
that there's like, if they don't have the answer, I don't think it's like as intentional of a gaslighting. I
sure.
think what happens is that everything is normalized in medicine.
Yeah.
Whereas as the patient, you are the one person who experiences this. As
Mhm.
a clinician, we see it over and over again. And we see like very severe things on top of it. So I think
Mhm.
the bigger issue is that clinicians in general tend to have kind of this like deflated scale of like,
Yeah, like, "Oh, it's
oh,
not that
it's
big of a
not that
deal."
bad. It's not that
Yeah,
big of a deal, right?
yeah,
And so I don't think that it's necessarily malicious gaslighting most
sure.
of the time, as much as it is like clinicians don't think about like, how does this impact the one patient who's sitting in front of me, and how do I
Yeah.
make that one patient's day-to-day life feel better? I think
Mhm.
they think about it much more on like the larger scale of community and epidemiology and like
Mhm.
all of the big picture stuff, but
And
you
it's easy to
lose
be
that
like, "You're not
relationship.
dying. What's the
Right,
problem?" Like,
right.
everyone
Or
else
like,
I talk to a lady that's, like, on her deathbed, "You're okay." So,
exactly.
yeah.
Like, just keep your eyes, like, let us know if it gets better, right?
Yeah.
And that answer sucks when you're the person that they're not listening to, right?
Mhm.
But I think that in general, OBGYN specifically is really built for like life-saving measures. And actually medicine
Yeah,
in general in America
sure.
is built for like life-saving measures and not
Mhm.
for that like day-to-day management of making
Op
sure you feel better and optimizing your like
Yes.
day-to-day health. And so I
Yeah.
think that that's the gaslighting, is the difference between like, if you're dying, I'm going to save you, and
Mhm.
oh, you feel like this part of your day-to-day health needs to be optimized,
Yeah.
right? Like, and I think it's in the in between that gaslighting happens.
Yes. And I mean, honestly, like that's what coaches like me do is we help you feel your best by doing all the basic lifestyle things, eating right, exercising, getting out in the sun, getting enough sleep. Like that's what's going to make you feel the best. And it's different from like with the doctors that are, like I said, you have like, the patient before you who's dying from some disease and they're like, you look great, you sound great, like go live your life and let me know if it gets better.
Literally. That, I
Yeah.
mean, that's the answer for so many people all the time.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and
I totally
I
get
do
that.
think, that it needs to be a partnership of all of
Mhm.
the things working
I do
together,
too.
right? Like, I don't think it can be that there are functional coaches that shit
Mhm.
on Western medicine, and
Mm.
I don't think Western medicine can shit on coaches. Like,
Yeah.
I think it needs to be, hey, we all recognize that the system is flawed right now, and we're all doing our best to try to make people feel better. Let's work together and figure out how we help people.
Yes, I love that. And we love it when we have a client that signs up and like, I'm working closely with my doctor on this and this is what they said. I'm like, awesome. Ask your doctor what they think about this. It's like when it's a partnership, that's when it's amazing. But a lot of
Yeah.
times patients and our clients don't have that relationship with their doctor where they are kind of going back and forth with them. And that's probably comes back to the medical system in general, like we were talking about.
Yeah, I think it comes back to the medical system. I also think it comes back to a little bit like how we were conditioned to exist in the medical system. Like we're like, especially as women, we're conditioned to be like the good girl or the good patient, right? To like
Mm-hmm.
always say yes, to not cause a problem.
Yeah.
Like I wrote this in my book that there was this social media trend that was going around talking about women who feel brave enough to talk about their nail care when either the color of their nails or the shape of their nails isn't right, and how the bulk of women just sit there in the chair and leave, and then they get in their car and they're like, fuck, I hate my nails, right?
Mm.
And so if we're not telling our nail technician that we don't like the way they did our nails or we don't like the color, then the vast majority of women are not telling their clinicians that we need more out of healthcare.
That is so funny because that's me. Like, I mean, granted, I'm lucky I have a great nail girl, but if I don't like it or my hair's not, I don't say anything. I don't, because
Exactly.
I'm one of those. That's
Exactly. So
so
like
funny.
when we extrapolate that exact same concept into medicine, like
Mm-hmm.
what happens is women just like leave the visit and they're like, oh, I guess I didn't get what I needed.
Yeah. Oh, funny. That's so interesting. And then you don't do anything about it. You just go complain to your girlfriends, and
That's right.
here we are. Nothing's changing.
Right.
So, what do you think? Okay, we kind of talked about, you did a great job preparing us for appointments, and I love all those tips you made. What can we ask for? Like, what's maybe like too much to ask for in a visit? Talk a little bit about like what we should expect.
Yeah, and I think that that's a great segue from having talked about like we need to ask for more from like our nail technicians and all of the things, right?
I hope my nail tech and my hair girl don't listen to this, by the way. They'll be
or
like,
if they do, then that's great because they know that they've like passed your vibe check because you just said right thing, so that's good. Well, I think that it's really listening to ourselves first and foremost and trusting ourselves, because the same thing we were saying, that nail color isn't right the minute that they put that first nail on, right? Like the minute they paint that first nail, you're like, oh, I hate it. Right? Like it's the exact same thing. If you're not getting what you want in a visit, you can pick up and redirect the conversation. You can say, hey, I know you may think that this isn't a big deal, but this impacts my quality of life. So can we talk about how we can improve my quality of life? Because this does impact me on a day-to-day basis. Like, I know this isn't life-threatening, but this really bugs me. What can we do about it? Right?
And
like,
is the clinician, no, they're not going to be annoyed at that, or might they be?
Who gives a shit if they're annoyed?
It's true.
Like, who cares? It's your visit, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's the thing, is at the end of the day, it's your visit and your healthcare. And we need, especially as women, to wipe that entire piece out of our brain of like, who cares if they're annoyed?
Yeah,
right?
But we don't want to be the patient that the doctor goes back and like, she was so annoying, and blah, 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 and the office is talking about you. Yeah, I know. This is me and my people pleasing that's coming out in this conversation.
That's right. Why? Right? Like we've got to actively break down like what are we so worried about? And I don't think it's practical or feasible for you to say, I have this laundry list of 17. Let me tick off my provider by asking all 17 of them. And then when they leave the room, like, I'm not saying for you to be that patient.
But just standing up for yourself and
sharing how it really presents in your life, because you're the one who lives with these impacts and side effects and like the way you feel. And so they're never going to know unless we do our job of sharing what that actually feels like to be in our shoes and in our body, right?
Yeah, I love that.
That's what we have to think about is like, how do I share and really paint the picture of what this is like for me on a day-to-day basis, and what am I missing out on as a result of this?
I love that. That's amazing. So now you mentioned you transitioned into advocacy. Tell me more about your book and what's Take Back Trust.
Yeah. I wrote a book called We Deserve More, and it talks about how reproductive health care is broken and what we can do about it. So it's a lot of kind of the conversations that we've been having already, and a lot of breaking down some of these pieces, these people-pleasing practices if you will, right? And giving us some actual scripts that we can use to think about in our head what's working, what's not working, and going from there. And I think that that's a really important thing. In addition to that, it talks about the background of reproductive health care and really teaches you the foundation that's a really broken foundation that I think helps people to understand the landscape that we find ourselves in when it comes to reproductive health care. And then Take Back Trust is an organization that I started that does a lot of, it's a web-based platform that does a lot of education. And we're also doing a lot of narrative change framework in social media, kind of combating some of the mis and disinformation that we see surfacing online.
I
So
love
the
that.
whole goal is really teaching people and people and getting people to show up as active participants in their own health, specifically as it relates to reproductive health care.
That's amazing. I love that so much. When you say reproductive health care, is that mainly just like baby making years, or like do you talk a lot to like menopause, perimenopause, that sort of thing?
Yeah, menopause, perimenopause, adolescence as well, right? We talk a lot about kind of what does it look like getting, as a teenager and ascending into. So it's any reproductive health, which includes, right, your uterus and ovaries and breasts, it's mammograms and breast cancer. I had my yearly mammogram this morning.
Oh my gosh, I need to go do that. That's on my list to make that appointment. That, and I have to get my first colonoscopy this year. I'm like, which month do I want to do that?
Yeah, which I think these are important things. I'm so happy that comes up on this podcast because then just little flickers in the back of people's minds.
Yeah, man, I got to do that too.
But I've got to do it, right?
Yeah.
And so to anybody listening right now thinking that they've got to do it, that is your homework this week.
Yes.
Put it on your calendar to book it because I think
it's important. Well, it's been on my calendar to book it and I keep putting it off. So I need to put an alarm on my phone that I don't turn off until I actually call and make the appointments.
There you go.
But this has been amazing, Nikki. Thank you so much. I think it's a very empowering conversation and I love all of the very tactical, you gave us background, education, tactical tips and tricks we can do to prepare for an appointment. I love that part in particular. So thank you so much for being here. How can we find you? Are you on social media?
Yep, I'm on social media. You can find me at Nikki Vink, NIKKIVINCK. You can find my book, You Deserve More, anywhere that books are sold. And you can go to takebacktrust.com.
Awesome. And I'll put all those in the show notes for people to check you out. And thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Lindsay. See you all later.
See you.